In the last Amiga episode, I promised to come back and show you some of the accessories for the Amiga 1000, and so here they are. I borrowed all of these from Bo Zimmerman's collection. These three items here are RAM expanders, well, sort of. So this one here is just a basic RAM expander that adds an additional 512K of fast RAM to the Amiga 1000. In order to use these, you'll have to pop off the little door on the side of the Amiga 1000, and this unit just pops in there like so. It's relatively thin and doesn't look too terribly tacky, and that's really all there is to it. As soon as you boot up your Amiga again, it will instantly have 1 megabyte of RAM available. Now, this thicker unit here is a bit more interesting. It's not actually a RAM expander. In fact, Bo has a little note on here that says it is Kickstart 1.2 and a real-time clock, but missing the battery. It has a couple of switches on the rear, and it has a pass-through connector so you can add another accessory to the system bus. So let's plug this thing in and see what it does. Okay, I'm going to power on the computer. And the main thing it does is this. As you can see, the 1000 boots straight to the Workbench disk screen. It no longer requires the Kickstart disk to be loaded first, which makes the computer much faster to boot, whether you're booting straight to a game or loading up Workbench. But it doesn't actually contain any RAM, which you would think it would considering its size. If we take it apart, you'll see it's primarily just ROM chips and the real-time clock circuitry with a missing battery. So to get the extra RAM, you'd need to add something like this in addition to the Kickstart module. Or we can try this last module here, which is a larger RAM unit that can add up to 2 megabytes of fast RAM, although I think only 1 megabyte is populated. And so there we go. With both units installed, it can boot up to Workbench without the Kickstart disk, and I have 1.5 megabytes of RAM at my disposal. Okay, so let's move along. Now I want to show you the Amiga 1020 disk drive. Now these are somewhat rare. Looking at the side of the box, you'll see it's a regular 360K drive and seems targeted towards IBM PC compatibility. Although they do mention that it uses low-cost 5¼ inch floppy diskettes, and I guess they were lower cost at the time, but you'd only be able to use this for your personal data files because no commercial software for the Amiga is shipped on this type of disk. So unboxing it here, you'll see it actually comes with the Amiga Transformer software from the factory. This is basically a software emulator for running MS-DOS software on the Amiga. Okay, so let's get the drive itself out. A lot of people mistake this drive for being a 1571, and there's no wonder why. If you compare them, they're basically identical other than the badge on the bottom right. I'm pretty sure they reused most of the same molds for the case. However, the rear is slightly different, as you can see. The 1020 has the Amiga drive interface instead of the old serial system used by the Commodore 8-bit machines. So let's connect this up to the Amiga 1000. It just connects to the regular floppy drive port like so. Although one difference with other Amiga drives is that it does require its own external power. I seem to have left the software disk at Bo's house, so I just made a copy from the internet. Once the Transformer software loads, it will ask for an MS-DOS disk, so I'll use this one. The internal drive is drive A, and it will in fact read regular IBM formatted disks. And of course the external drive is drive B. And so here we are, the usual A prompt. Here's a standard MS-DOS formatted disk, and if we switch to B drive, then we can get a full list of the directory. But there's absolutely no hope of running this game. Transformer doesn't emulate any graphics modes at all. In fact, it doesn't even do color text. It emulates the original IBM MDA card, and if you try to run something with graphics, you just wind up with a flashing cursor at the top of the screen. And annoyingly, you'd think you could do like Control, Alt, and then Delete to reset your PC emulation, but nope, doesn't work. So you pretty much have to reset the entire Amiga and reload all of the software. Although to be fair, later I read through the manual and realized that they had the delete key mapped over here to the decimal point key, and it does in fact work for the reset of the emulated PC. The software claims to be able to run lots of business software like Lotus 123 or WordPerfect, and it probably does, but I don't have either of those to try. But it will run GW Basic, and I was able to both type in some software and try some basic programs from the internet. And as long as it didn't use any graphics commands, it ran fine, albeit very slowly. Speaking of slowly, I ran this benchmarking program to find out how fast this is compared to a traditional IBM PC, and discovered it runs at about 14% the speed of an original PC. Another way of looking at that is it's 7 times slower than a 4.77 MHz IBM with MDA video. Clearly they never intended this for games, but I wanted to try something, and I tried dozens of text or character-based games and couldn't really get much of anything to work without crashing. I finally got this castle adventure game to work. I think it's supposed to run in 40 columns, and the emulator still presents it in 80 columns, but at least everything lines up, even though it is squished to one side. But even then, it is horrendously slow. So let's take a look at a third-party product that came out several years later called PC Task. Now this one will even emulate VGA, CGA, or EGA graphics, but I know it's going to be slow, so I'm going to select CGA here. It has detected R2 drives. I ran the same benchmark program, although it looks nice and it has color. The speed is actually slightly slower at 9%. Now, on the bright side, PC Task was able to run nearly everything I threw at it. The only trouble was it wasn't fast enough to be usable. I mean, even a text-based game like Flash Attack was far too slow to actually play. So it seems the compatibility is really good, and no doubt when this software is used on newer Amigas with faster processors, some of these things would probably be bearable to use. But here, it's almost comical how slow it is. It's worth mentioning that the Amiga appears fast when playing native video games because it has the various coprocessors. But for this task of emulation, it boils down to that 7 MHz CPU trying to emulate a totally different CPU and all of the video hardware. It's just too much for it. That being the case, let's look at Commodore's answer to this problem, the Amiga 1060 Sidecar. Besides the main bus connector, it also connects to the 2 joystick ports, and I suspect these are just passed through to the front because this device would otherwise physically block the joystick ports. So let's get this thing attached and see how it works. Admittedly, this thing isn't terribly elegant looking, plus it's slightly yellow and needs retrobrite. Here's how the power works. So you unplug the power from the Amiga 1000, and then you take this little power cord that hangs out of the sidecar and plug that into the Amiga's power port, like so. And then you plug the main power from the wall into the sidecar. The mouse will now plug into this pass-through port at the front. And the power on procedure is, you turn on the Amiga 1000 first, but it doesn't do anything because it doesn't have power yet. And then you power on the sidecar, and both units come to life. After loading Kickstart, then it needs to load a custom software to use the sidecar. The interesting thing is, the sidecar itself boots up somewhat independently from the Amiga. In fact, as it boots up, listen to the chirp it makes. It's kind of quiet and a bit hard to hear. Yep, that's the same boot sound you hear from the PET and also the Commodore PC series computers. Anyway, so what we'll do now is we'll open the folder called PC, and you have the choice for PC Color or PC Mono. Now we'll choose Color for the moment. And so what you'll get is MS-DOS in a window, so to speak. You can actually resize the window. Of course, then you'll have to scroll because it doesn't resize the interior. And of course, you can make it go full screen. Okay, so you can't actually use the internal drive on the Amiga 1000 as an MS-DOS drive like you can on the other 2 emulators I showed. So this is going to be your A drive, and if you want a B drive, especially a 720 of any kind, then you'll have to plug in an external Amiga drive. And that drive actually plugs in directly to the sidecar mechanism itself, not to the Amiga 1000. That being said, let's try reading an MS-DOS disk. People always accuse me of trying to plug my own game in every video where I need a disc, but the truth is, I just have hundreds of these on the shelf right behind me, and it's just the easiest and quickest disc for me to try. Anyway, there's something I noticed right away when playing the game, and it's sort of hard to explain. The game itself is running more or less at full speed, but the video display is only updating at a frame rate of maybe 4 or 5 frames per second. So it looks like it's running slow even though it isn't. Now, I also discovered that if I right-click, there's a whole menu of options to play around with. Oh, and by the way, it only seems to support CGA graphics. I tried some EGA stuff, but it didn't work. So the next thing I wanted to try was the same MIPS program to find out how fast this setup is compared to the emulator. And it looks like it reads 1.0 on every measurement, meaning it's exactly the same speed as the original IBM PC. So I tried playing a few more games, and honestly, it seems to work with just about anything I throw at it, as long as it's a game from the appropriate era. In fact, it seems that games that don't update the whole screen seem to run a bit better, or at least the video lag is less noticeable. But I should again point out that I doubt seriously this device was meant for running games. I mean, after all, if you had an Amiga 1000, why would you care anything about running CGA games? No, I'm sure this device was meant for people to run all of the boring business software that was common on IBMs of the day. I also noticed another interesting feature. It turns out you can open a mono window at the same time as a color window. You can't really fit them well on the screen, but this gives the same functionality as having a mono and color card in your IBM, which is one of the ways people had dual displays back in the day since they could be used simultaneously. Alright, so now I'm going to take this thing apart and see what makes it tick. And what you're going to find here is that this thing is basically just an IBM PC clone, more or less completely self-contained. As you can see, it even has 3 ISA expansion slots. One of those is a modern compact flash system to simulate a hard drive, which Bo installed himself. The longer card looks suspiciously familiar. Let's take that out and see if my suspicion is accurate. Yep, this is an AST 6-pack card. For those that don't know, I used to work at AST back in the 90s. This card provides extra RAM, a real-time clock, serial ports, parallel ports, among other things, all on a single card. However, this did not come with the computer from the factory. Bo said it was already in there when he acquired it, so the original owner must have installed it. Anyway, I'm going to continue to take it apart so we can see the motherboard. As you can see, it has 2 boards stacked on top. That's partially how it achieves the skinnier size it has, but it also needs to have an elevated board to match up with the Amiga's expansion bus. Having removed the upper board, you can see that this is basically an entire PC clone system, fully self-contained. It just happens to be missing a video card and a keyboard port. I'm not super impressed with any of the PC emulation products I've shown in this video, but keep in mind these were all pretty early attempts. What I am impressed with are some of the later products for the Amiga 500 and 2000. In fact, one product I've been looking for a long time is the AMAX system for emulating a Macintosh. Now, if anybody has one they could loan me for a future video, please get in contact with me. Also, while waiting on the next episode, if you'd like more nerdy material, I'd recommend you watch the Geekbits podcast, where me and my brother and a friend sit around. We talk about philosophy, science fiction, retro tech, all kinds of nerdy stuff. You'll find the link in the description.